peek behind the curtain of the Softly Training Lab with the Softly Performance Podcast. The pinnacle of human performance is out there, and we intend to find it.
All right, welcome, Softly Podcast listeners, to the next Softly Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Coach G, and with me, I've got Coach Matt, and we've got another guest today. We've got Mark Small of Poseidon Strength. Those of you who've been in the, let's say, tactical human performance segment, at least from a practitioner standpoint, may be familiar with the stuff that they're putting out. This is essentially training modalities or equipment that's focused on isokinetics. And I don't want to digress too much as far as what is that if you don't know what I'm talking about, or who is Poseidon Strength, because that's why Mark is here. So Mark, can you talk a little bit about what you do and what is Poseidon Strength?
Sure. And G, Matt, again, thank you. We're thrilled and flattered to be included on the Softly podcast, and just excited to share with all of your subscribers and listeners who we are and what we do. So I think we're definitely somewhat new to the tactical space. We're making a little bit of a splash, but we joke that we're a company that's out there who wants to make isokinetics cool again. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I think as most engineers, probably hyper analytical, always want to optimize things, probably want to optimize some things that don't need to be optimized. But just as an engineer and somebody that always liked training and fitness, especially around the tactical space, when I got turned on to isokinetics, I just had a lot of questions. Like, if this is an advanced modality that gives you a better look into human performance, and it can, you look at some of the NIH studies around the knee and the rehab realm as a way to make people stronger faster, the question's like, why hasn't it been more readily available to just functional training? And I think if I look at my background as an engineer, I spent a lot of time in manufacturing and heavy industry where there's very complex solutions to very complex problems. And the more I was around training, and especially the training I was doing, I'm like, you got a climbing rope, you got a sandbag, you got some iron, like you've had the same stuff for decades and decades and decades. And we just kind of found this opportunity to start a business that wanted to optimize things that needed to be optimized, especially around safety, just to benefit the athlete and the tactician, whoever it is that's working out.
So you mentioned sandbags and iron. So I suppose, Matt, and you probably are thinking the same thing for the audience. There's isometrics, there's isotonic, and there's isokinetic. So what are those things? And then you also mentioned how let's make it cool again. So I think Matt and I both understand why you said that, but what does that mean to the general listeners? Like, what do you mean cool again? Like, why is it not cool? Why was it not?
Sure. Is that for Matt or is that for me?
That's for you.
Okay. For me. Yeah, I mean, for isometrics, I think one of the most interesting quotes that a really well-known sport physical therapist ever shared with us is that an isometric movement is an isokinetic movement. Your velocity is just zero, because in both of them, you have constant velocity. So if your velocity is zero, that's an isometric movement. So I think that was like a big eye-opener, and it took us a minute of kind of like staring around a blank room processing that before we understood it. But, just looking at how, again, as an engineer that kind of came to this space, we needed to get a crash course. We needed to meet people like Matt and UG and learn like what was important, what wasn't, why does it matter? And as people that started out as big enthusiasts in isokinetics and then started talking to people like you guys, one thing that really amazed me was just the huge focus on isometrics and the conclusions that can be drawn from it, like rate of force development, muscular impulse. I'm looking at muscular endurance. How long can you hold a load? I know there's people out there even doing research on like just the vibration wave analysis of an isometric, and what does that say about muscular health? Like, you can get pretty granular and pretty scientific from what you can do with an isometric. And again, that just further intrigued us as looking at an isokinetic as a type of isometric. It's almost like an isometric through the full range of motion, and then starting to analyze, well, what can we do with the data that comes from an isokinetic back squat or an isokinetic bench press? What does that do, and what does that tell you?
So Mark, obviously we'll make sure we have plenty of links to your products and stuff at the end, like in the show notes and at the end. But for listeners who maybe aren't kind of familiar, when I think isokinetics, I think I studied sports science. My undergrad was way back in the day, like 2007, 2010. So when I think isokinetics, I remember this thing that was like the size of a garden shed, and you kind of strapped in almost like Frankenstein. And I remember like the sensation of my quad feeling like it was going to be ripped off the bone. How is that different to like what you guys are bringing with Poseidon Strength?
Yeah, that's a great question to tee us up to, talk about the value that we serve. So I think it might be helpful if I tell you a little bit of our story and how we evolved.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, as we started out as a company that was big enthusiasts in isokinetics, we just jumped right to let's apply this to functional strength. So went up to my little fab shop. We call it the ADL, the Advanced Development Laboratory, but that's kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. We built a squat, bench, and deadlift machine that was isokinetic with, data output. And then took those on the road and met really good strength coaches in D1 programs, NFL programs, tactical community. And everybody looked at what we were doing in the exact same way. And they were like, you guys kind of took that big, I love that you said a garden shed. That's actually one of the largest things I've ever heard that machine compared to. But everybody looked at us and said, everybody once had really adopted the open chain isokinetics, and then everybody kind of got away from it because it was so big, it was so time consuming, it was so expensive. You guys are kind of like somebody took everything that was wrong with that and optimized it into a machine, and they're like, however, we're not going to buy individual machines from you guys. This is a return to play, it's a return to duty tool. And that is where the industry saw our technology plugging in. So we knew what our assignment was then, and we went back to the drawing board. And what we rolled out is what we now sell, and we call it our Force Train Tower. So what that is a highly versatile closed chain isokinetic machine that allows you to do all your core movements: squat, bench, deadlift, bent over row, overhead press. We get a little bit more granular now, doing things like testing the soleus by doing just, terminal dorsal flexion with the foot and then a calf raise. And I mean, again, one of the funny things that we learned along the way is I think isometrics is so heavily relied upon that we were so excited that we had built this awesome isokinetic device. And then a lot of people in the industry said, hey, can you do isometrics on this as well? So then we added that functionality. So just being able to very quickly and very, with a lot of versatility, apply isokinetic and isometric resistance and data output from all the movements I just mentioned. That's where we found a home run with that product.
I feel like for those larger setups, like you kind of collegiate sport, tactical, where you've got a lot of people to run through, like you've got 50, 100 people in a session to get through, be it testing or training or whatever. Like this is such a cliche term, sorry, in terms of like a force multiplier, this thing's huge. Like you can just, there's no messing around with, okay, well, the bar's not quite set up to the right height, need to move the rack. You just can bang people through because it's so simple. Like the setup.
Yeah, we now have some D1 programs, some pretty well-known ones that are using our product to baseline entire Olympic sport teams. And as we had a lot of conversations with professionals in the space, we learned that the guys that were the slickest with setting up the open chain devices, if you were going to do ham quad ratios, you were probably still looking at 10 to 12 minutes an athlete. Yeah. And we're running people through functional movements like single leg RDL, single leg squat, and we're doing those limb symmetry index analysis and that baselining of athletes in well under 2 minutes. So you're getting more functional data, you're getting closed chain, you're doing movements, and you already said it, where you strapped down and felt like your quad was going to explode. Yeah. We've picked up so many good sayings from people like you guys, and now we're just rebranding them as ours, but really we got them from the industry. But one is training is the test is training. So if you're RDLing and squatting, that's how we wanted to deliver the test. So you're used to doing it. It's not a new movement. You're not putting a seatbelt on. It's what you're doing with your barbell.
So just to paint a really clear picture for listeners, what Matt and Mark are talking about, there's machines, specifically the brand I keep thinking of is Humac, where, like Matt said, you're strapped down. It's focused on one joint. So quad strength, for example. So your leg is immobilized essentially. And in addition to that, so isotonic resistance is like your traditional resistance machine in the gym, the big box gym. It's using mass, it's using plates. Isokinetics are regulating the speed. That's why an isometric is a speed of 0. So think of it like you're strapping down your leg. It's very immobilized. You're only allowed to bend your knee in a certain way, and it's going to measure, or rather limit your speed to a certain speed, and it'll change the load accordingly. Mark, can you talk about that? Why is that good to have? You mentioned the word functional. Why is it okay to have this machine? Why wasn't it around before? I think I know the answer, but I would love to hear from you. Why is it good to have isokinetics with these global movements that you've talked about?
Sure. Where we really find value in the whole conversation around a company like Humac or the open chain isokinetics is really a fascinating one for us. Because many physical therapists, they need that isolated data, and we do not make any strides as a business to replace that. So, I mean, there is value in just understanding quad strength or hamstring strength, but it is time consuming. Where we provide value is if you look at a lot of, rehab protocols there, you might not start doing any, like you just did a great job of explaining what isotonic is. You might not do an isotonic back squat until months into your rehab. With the safety that we deliver from functional isokinetics, we can slide that functional training movement from the rehab scale up pretty far so that now the day an ortho clears you to pull, you're back squatting on our machine. And what that allows us to do is take time off the back of the rehab. The other reason that matters is because what we learned as we started navigating a lot of these conversations with different universities and pro teams was the open chain was just so cumbersome and time consuming, they gave up on it. So it wasn't something that they were investing time in anymore. Ours was so quick that now if you can gather that baseline data, if you have any problem, maybe somebody just has a little soft tissue, injury going on, or maybe it is post-op rehab, you have that gold standard to compare them to what they look like pre-injury. So that's the huge focus on the baselining. And I think that's something we're noticing from very forward-thinking programs is sports science is really becoming like the nucleus of a program where they're getting that baseline data, they're working with strength, they're the keeper of all that data, and then sports science is also working with sports medicine whenever there's an injury to make sure that from a data-driven standpoint that athlete is exactly what they were or better than before they were injured.
You mentioned like how the kind of the terminology of like training is the testing is the training. I think like that's something that's so valuable from like with all sport, but particularly within tactical, where we maybe need to have, we can touch on kind of that constant readiness, if you like, as a term later on. But where you can't really afford to have, okay, well, we've scheduled from the 4th of May, this is going to be a testing week, and then we're going to get into a training block because you might have something crazy happen on the week before. But if you can like constantly collect data within your training sessions, it's so much less disruptive. And I think having that ability with products like yours, where you can kind of literally close the loop every session, like that's unreal. That's such a cool thing to have access to. And I was just going to ask, like, what does that back end side of things look like the data analysis?
Sure. That was an area we focused a lot on because we just understand the different softwares in the space can be cumbersome. So the Force Train Tower that we sell has an onboard touchscreen PC. Everything will live on that. And then we have APIs that can export data into any athlete management system, or you can do whatever you want with our raw data too. So very simple user setup where you pick, the individual you're working with, what the movement is, what the velocity is, and then you hit start and we're just graphing all your metrics in real time. So the higher the output, the more force that's registered. And that was another thing that we learned is, for an athlete, there might be a feedback loop where you don't get results in like for a day or two, right? Like if you're using things that are Bluetooth enabled, you might not know, like you have that testing day and then you find out a day or two later what that means. So that's why we found it very important to have that onboard computer and touchscreen. So the second you're done doing a test and you hit stop, you're seeing your result versus your best and your last. And that's very deliberate for quite a few reasons. One is the immediacy. And then two is also so that maybe you just, that's one of the interesting things about isokinetics. It's all just about your max effort. So maybe you didn't do your max and then you see I'm not as strong as I was last week, but that makes no sense because I'm better rested. I ate better, I'm better recovered. So you can not destroy your data and just do a quick retest and then try harder. So we tried to give all the tools to the practitioner and the user to just make it as an effective machine as possible.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
You have me wondering on like, have you seen or observed or have any teams reported back to you as saying like, hey, it's pulled this up as a kind of a red flag for an athlete? I'm wondering if you've gotten reports of, we pulled this athlete because he was about to break on the field, something like that. I'm just curious.
Sure. And I think from a business standpoint, that whole injury prevention is like the holy grail of the realm that we live in. But we're also so blessed to have some of what I would consider to be like real thought leaders in the sport physical therapy space as friends of ours. And if you bring that kind of topic up with them, they're like, don't do that. Stay away from that. So
that's exactly why I was like,
yeah. We do not make any claims like that. I think like right away, a really interesting case study we got last summer, we installed with a local Pennsylvania-based Division I football program, and they had an athlete who on field at full hip extension was complaining about hamstring pain. And the program was just having a hard time getting the data to support what the injury was. So they were trying to better understand it. And when we had installed whatever it was, like 5 or 6 days earlier, we talked about using RDL for hamstrings. They said, let's try that. And it was such an interesting case study for us because what it showed was, depending where you looked at from a limb symmetry index analysis for single leg RDL, the athlete is able to get to the same peak force through an RDL, but through the full range of motion, you were looking at a 40% strength deficiency and also a dramatic difference in RDL. So they were like, boom, there it is. So we're not today using our data to say like, oh, if you see this, this is a potential, but we are using it so that if somebody's like, someone just doesn't quite feel right today, it's like, let's test that functionally. Okay, you're 40% strength deficient as an average force measure. Like there's something going on. And that's also where our machine shines, is now with isometrics, we have different MVIC and target modes where you can just get right into isometric loading. So, I mean, I think as an industry outsider, I thought maybe it'd be a little bit different, but as we got to know some good sport physical therapists and athletic trainers, they're like, park them where it hurts and load isometrically, like do what feels comfortable. And again, we shine there because we're just giving people that immediate feedback. What does it look like compared to the healthy limb? What does it look like compared to yesterday?
I was going to say that's huge. I think, especially in the kind of the rehab world, with the having the feedback from isometrics, because it's so hard to quantify that unless you have that objective measure. But then once you've got that, that's immediate buy-in, because you can see progress, you can see the deficiencies. So I think that sounds like such a small part of it, but that's massive. Sorry, G, I cut you off.
No, so I'm just trying to imagine, because I know for a lot of listeners, they don't know what isokinetic resistance feels like. What I was thinking of was a smart bike trainer. So anybody who has a smart bike trainer knows what I'm talking about. If you're doing an FTP test or you're doing any kind of, let's say, prescribed interval, and it wants 180 watts from you, you might start pedaling fast to make the bike feel easier, but then it'll adjust the resistance accordingly to make it 200 watts. Or if you start going slower, it'll adjust the resistance to get 200 watts. So if you have a smart bike trainer, I feel like isokinetics probably feels something like that. But Mark, I'm curious, because I mean, it's your baby. Can you tell the listener what isokinetic resistance feels like in comparison to isotonic? Like what, and why does that matter? Why? I feel like it's important for them to know it's just not another mode of resistance. It's a little more subtle than that as far as perception.
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like an enemy or like, an adversary. It's like you try to move it faster and it just doesn't go faster. And I think that challenges everything in the way we're programmed. Like if you're moving something and you apply more force, it should move faster. And the fact that isokinetic resistance just instantaneously doesn't move faster allows you to make more force. And just in all of our different trade show and conference journeys and demos, I mean, we travel the country in 2 demo vans, and we've learned so many things just from trade shows, where it's very common where, say, you have somebody that, can back squat, I'll just say 315 pounds. They'll come out of the hole at 315. They might build to like 450, 500 the first time they do an isokinetic back squat. And we'll let them do 5 reps. And then we explain what all the data means. And we're like, nobody's training at that top band of a back squat because it doesn't make any sense. Like if anything, you get made fun of if you're just up there like, barely dropping from vertical. And we're like, so we want you to drive as hard as you can at the top of your back squat. And somebody will immediately put 200 to 300 pounds on the very top of their back squat. They're coming out of the hole at 315, but now they're building to 750. And that's what immediately in the early days just drew me to isokinetic resistance, is like, what are all the effects of that in a back squat? Like now you're training under such higher force on the musculoskeletal system, just the central nervous system to be firing and creating that much force through the full range of motion. So that's one of the things that, that we see, but it is definitely very experiential. So just letting people see what it feels like is, hence the two.
So if you, I guess kind of as an extension of that, if you, okay, so you come into so I'm also a volunteer firefighter. So you've come into our fire hall and you've put 1 unit in to, like, how would you say 50 guys? How many units would you suggest for that sort of number of people?
Getting to 50 is like the 1 to 2 sweet spot where you start looking to do 2.
Sweet. So you've come in, you've put 2 units in. Like, what does day 1 look like? Is that kind of all we're doing, or is that part of a session? Like, what does it kind of look like in terms of integrating your stuff into a training plan?
Yeah. So great question. So as far as our force train tower, tactical is a little bit new to us. So we're mainly on the athletic side.
Okay.
Day one would typically look like training staff to use it as a baselining tool with teams. And then again with sports med for the return to play and comparing data. So baselining is a big thing, just baselining to understand strength. And then also using it as a tool to do training like overcoming isometrics. So you look at the setup for that, we're a fraction of the time, and then you can just park people and train isometrically. So that's been an interesting journey for us, because hence the name Poseidon Strength. In the early days, we thought we were a strength training company. The industry said this is a return to play tool. You belong in sports medicine. With the direction I mentioned earlier, with sports science kind of being the nucleus of a lot of programs, sports science got wind of what we were doing and how efficient it was. And now we have our first D1 football program where the strength coach was like, look at the benefits of this. Let's get it into some programming. So it took us 2 years, but we've kind of come.
Yeah, absolutely. That was something I saw actually on your website, talking about, I do quite a lot of overcoming ISOs myself, but I do it on the cheap with like a safety bar or like some weird setup with a straight bar. Having the safety factor built in where it's not going to bury you if you miss the lift. That's like enough of a reason for me to be, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
That's cool. How does that work? So for listeners, if I'm doing maybe like an overcoming ISO, it might be, say I'm trying to hold a straight bar an inch or so off my chest at the bottom of a bench press with a weight that like I can't hold for more than, say, we'll use 5-10 seconds at this point. So I'm trying to hold that position. Eventually I'm going to fail and drop the bar to the pins, ideally not straight onto my chest. That would be how you do like a conventional setup. What would something look like for that with you guys?
Yeah, as a business, like everything we want to do is around optimizing with a focus on safety. So if you do overcoming ISOs on our force train tower, we deliberately build in like hysteresis into the movement, meaning that you can pull the bar down with almost nothing in that mode. And then you could apply, for some, like, I don't know, say you apply 450 pounds. And if at any second you stop, there is zero stored energy in the system. So it's just completely relaxed. There's nothing there. So
Yeah.
you're really you're your own worst enemy. Like you're just driving against what you're capable of. And if you stop, there is nothing there.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
As an aside, I remember I had the privilege when I was an intern, no longer an intern, I was a young coach, and I had the opportunity to go to Westside Barbell. And the man himself, Louis Simmons, took me around, and he showed me everything, and including a machine that he was working on. There was essentially a sexy Smith machine with air resistance, and he could hit a button, one of those that stops or allows for air pressure to build, and you couldn't move. So now you're doing an isometric. But that device was so complicated, it required a second person, to activate. What you're describing just sounds so much easier.
Yeah, it's very easy to use.
So Mark, you kind of talked before about how you've predominantly come from the sport world. What's your step across into tactical look like?
That was
so great question. I guess I could kind of just tell you guys the story of how we came to be as Poseidon, because that's a little bit of I'd like to think it's interesting and maybe atypical, but really the whole company came to exist from some time I spent working up in Alaska. So I was working for like a remote outfitter in the Kodiak Islands, and then was fortunate enough to jump on some different crabbers and salmon boats. And whenever I was on the crabbers, anybody that's listening that has seen The Deadliest Catch, they just use a block with a hydraulic motor that pulls crab pots up off the bottom of the ocean. So in my travels up there, got to meet a lot of really cool entrepreneurs, and just decided, by the time I was in my mid-20s, I want to go back to Pennsylvania, try to start some company. So came home, started working in running a freight rail laboratory of all things, where we were just doing very, very high levels of energy attenuation with very small components. And then one night I saw an Instagram video of Troy Polamalu training in the off season on pneumatic resistance. I'm like, that's cool. I'm working with stuff that's kind of similar to that. I wonder what I could do. And somehow I put together what I was doing in this freight rail lab and then a crab pot puller from the Bering Sea together, and was like, we could build an endless rope climber. So right before COVID hit, I had these prototypes that was just that. It's an endless rope climber. So it was isokinetic. So no matter what the user weighed, the rope would feed one rate, and it was just a rope you could climb forever and not get anywhere. And then very foolishly going into COVID, everybody we called in whatever it was, June of 2020 was like, do not call me again unless you're selling Clorox bleach. So we were like, oh, darn, this product's a dud. We just got the wrong message. So we were like, all right, back burner that. And then I'd always had this grander vision of doing functional isokinetics. So built the early prototypes, went on the road, how we discussed. And then like Wake Forest was our number one customer and we'll forever be in their debt for that. And then things just kind of started snowballing there with the Force Train Tower. And then last summer, my business partner was like, hey, I'm going to do something with some of the ropes we have. I'm like, all right, do what you want. So we gave one to a pretty prominent wrestling strength coach, got 500,000 views overnight with this rope. And then a week later, I was at a local facility in Harrisburg where there just happened to be a pretty well-known former Delta operator going through this program using our Force Train Tower. And he just interrupted me and said, why are you not telling me about this infinity rope you guys sell? And I'm like, you saw that? Like, I didn't know anybody was, even going to our website at that time, and let alone him. And he was like, I think, whenever I was still down at Bragg, I did a good bit with human performance. And he's like, grip strength is just one of the things that can be such a weakness in the tactical community. He's like, you very well may have like the grip strength training tool. So that really turned us on to tactical. And from a lot of our athletics travels, we had made some really good friendships and connections on the tactical front. So right away, we just started calling people like, hey, we have this. They're like, well, get us one down for a pilot. And a lot of those have led from where people got one and they come back and buy like 10 more. So when you brought up fire, that's what we're doing. Like fire's been good to us with our infinity rope. We've got Marines, Army, Navy. Hopefully we'll get the Air Force too. So we're just really growing the market around our infinity rope. But then from a business standpoint for us, it's just been an interesting like kind of conversation opener, which then usually gives us the opportunity to show people what we do with our Force Train Tower in the tactical side. And that's exactly what happened for me down at Quantico at the Marine Corps. So they were an early adopter of the rope. I started showing up. We'd always have a Force Train Tower. The more people got to try it, they were like, this is different. Like, I had no idea this is what it was going to feel like. Like, I almost cringed you when you were like, explain what it feels like. I'm like, we've been trying for 2 to 3 years to say that verbally. And I think I still sound like an engineer when I try to describe it. Like, it's not good. But no, like the Marine Corps should be one of our first customers here this summer with a Force Train Tower on the tactical side. And they're going to use it to baseline squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, and bent over row. So just a great, just because they want that data on a huge anthropometric group of Marines. So really cool opportunity for us. And then another like overlap, just to answer your question here, Matt, like into the tactical space, we had met Doc through our travels. And we always heard how much of a pain it could be to do like the 1 rep max or the 3 rep max deadlift test in the tactical community. And early people from the tactical space that saw our tech were like, this would be the way to test the deadlift, because injury, not going to happen. It's only, you can't do something that your body can't do, right? Like you're creating your own resistance in a sense. So when we met Dr. Fry, we ended up giving him a deadlift. And I think it was just last week, he just put a paper out on comparing an isotonic barbell, like 1 rep max deadlift, to an isokinetic, and how that data could be predictive of what your barbell could look like. So that's a cool step for us as a business to just start looking at how could we be a more efficient, safer way to do the type of testing that's required in the tactical space.
Hell, you can even have it be, it doesn't have to be this group PT thing. You can have your whoever you're testing come in at different times. Like you don't have to do the group warm up and all that stuff. Like if the unit is autonomous enough, theoretically speaking, because you can't cheat the bar, it's a machine.
That's I was going to say from like personal experience so I was Royal Air Force before we moved to the States. So you'd be in that exact position. You'd have like some doctrinal paper come down where predominantly with aircrew, they're saying, yeah, for aircrew, like it makes complete sense. We need to 3 rep maximum on everything. So we've got this data, like the stronger they are, probably the better they'll fly. We need to prove this. And you're like, yeah, I completely get the theory. That makes sense. But this guy has never touched a barbell before, and you want me to 3 rep max him. But now you can. Now you've got that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was we've had a lot of eye openers along our journey here, and one for me was just you can dig up a lot of different federally funded studies around soldiers and strength testing, and like you can read the opening paragraph. It's like the study was started with 560 male participants and was concluded with 502 because this many were injured doing the dead. And you're like, oh my gosh, like it's right here, like it's hurting people. Like, but you need to understand human strength potential. So I think that's just a great interlude for us where, we can do that very safely.
I'm really intrigued with the infinity rope as well. So I didn't realize that was your first product.
Yeah, most people don't, but that's actually because of kind of like the order in which we grew the customer base.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where it all started as a business, was just with our small infinity rope.
Yeah. And again, we'll kind of make sure there's links and stuff so people can see what you're describing, what you're talking about. And I remember I was talking to G about this offline. I remember the last unit I was at, it was a rehab, like a rehab facility, a rehab gym. And we had like what kind of sounds like a poor cousin to what you developed. And it was, it was kind of like sitting down on a bench and you pulled the rope like horizontally rather than climbed it.
Sure.
I remember thinking it could be so cool if it was done properly. And like, I never used it because you could never load it enough, or like you just never, the idea was great, but it never worked properly. But that kind of problem is obviously solved with something like with something like the infinity rope, because you're actually climbing.
Yeah, we get so many light bulb moments where people are like, oh, wait, you can actually climb this one. And we're like, you can climb it. And it was very important to us to, as directly replicate the rope climbing experience as we possibly could. So our unit just goes up in the air because there's never been a human performance space that has too much of a floor space. I always joke about that. So we occupy 0 floor space. It is a 3-strand rope. It's 1.5 inches, and you can climb it and knock it anywhere. So
yeah, that's cool. And whereabouts have you put those in? Like, what kind of? You don't necessarily need to name names. What kind of facilities are you supplying with those?
Yeah, I mean, our immediate home for that was wrestling, and then we partnered with some rack manufacturers. So we've developed I should say, our partners have developed arms where the rope can just plug into a rack. We've done ceiling mounts. We've gotten into certain scenarios where, like, we had an army base that was really interested, but they were in an old hangar with a 40-foot ceiling, and just dropping a chain from 40 feet does not make a lot of sense. So different scenarios like that, we ended up rolling out what we call the infinity rope rig, which is a tower, kind of looks like a shepherd's hook. We have it on our website, but it supports mounting the rope, like hanging the rope from the rig, and then you just bolt into the floor, and it's still a very small footprint, and then you can daisy chain those together. So we just keep getting more and more creative with where we can mount them. We have some living outdoors. There's some other manufacturers in the space that make some pretty nice just little towers to hang climbing ropes from, and we plug in extremely well there. You take the climbing rope down, you hang an infinity rope, and you're up and running.
Yeah, so versatile. That's great.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, how many of us have climbed the rope and your goal is to touch the top of it, right? You've got the bell, you've got whatever the target you're supposed to touch. So how do you measure success or completion with the rope? I mean, is it a time thing? Like, can you tell us about that?
When you run out of tears.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not coming off.
It's a great question. And we did really want to leave it completely just zero power requirement whatsoever. So with it having just the ability to live outside, be beat on, the Marines always joke with us. They're like, yeah, give us the first one, and if it can be broken, we'll do it immediately. So we really just wanted it to be a tough product. So our simple solution to that, with it being isokinetic, is once you set a speed, which speed goes everywhere from 0 to 6, 0 being like it's barely moving. So if you set it to a 3, you can have people say, okay, climb for as long as you can on 3, and then compare time. And then if you want to know climbing distance, because there are certain people that still use the 30-foot rope on the O course, we can make a 30-foot rope that has a color band on it. So if you start from that band and you climb one rotation, you just went 30 feet. So pretty, not very sexy solution, but just a simple one. Like,
yeah, that's exactly what you need.
Yeah. If I was fiddling with an app, I would get frustrated.
Yeah. It's been funny, like all the conversation and questions we had around our 4-string tower, like the big isokinetic tech. The rope was kind of funny because our first market being wrestling there, like we got into Penn State wrestling in West Virginia, and as soon as we would install it, wrestling or strength coach would go get wrestlers and be like, try it. They'd be like, what is this? And they'd be like, it's a fucking rope, climb it. So like, it's like, that was the narrative, was like, climb the rope. And it just became like such an easy demo, as opposed to like, it's got immediate feedback. It has an EP. So we'll always laugh about that with the rope, that it's a pretty.
Oh man, that's working with athletes versus being a personal trainer. I think oftentimes it's like, it's a fucking rope, man. Figure it out. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what is, as far as, I feel like there are two different questions for your tower versus the infinity rope. What's exciting about both categories for you? I feel like we kind of talked about that, but I'm curious.
I think for us, what's really exciting about the infinity rope, and I'll be totally transparent and honest here, was that it was almost a product that we had written off and kind of was like, man, I can't believe we put all that time and energy into that. So what's really exciting about that is just seeing people like really quickly adopting it and then getting one and then coming back for 10 more. And it's like, for us, that's the proof that people love it. Like, we just had 3 wrestlers that all graduated from a D1 program. They're all now involved in different club wrestlings, and they had one at their facility, and all 3 of them reached out and were like, hey, can we get a quote for one of those Infinity? And we're like, the dog will eat the dog food. Like, these guys love it. And I think, I said early on in the conversation, as an engineer, engineers want to optimize things, and sometimes they don't need to be optimized. And I don't want to be doing things if they don't need to be done. Like, I don't want to sell something that's going to collect dust in the corner. So what really excites me about the Infinity Rope is just seeing people love it, seeing people come back for more of them, or, they go to a different gym and now I have to have one. And I think the other thing that really excites me with both products, so I guess I'll use it as the interlude, is just the safety. I mean, we put a rope in on a base, and the day before we installed it last December, a female soldier fell from the top of a 30-foot rope and suffered a very severe ankle fracture. I am in no way saying that we could have prevented that. I'm not going to say that, but we are viewed as a tool that will help train people to prevent that in the future, as a tool to help safely learn it, to, build the grip strength to hold yourself. If maybe that first foothold slips, you're not just plummeting down. So again, are we going to totally prevent all of those? I'm not here to make that claim, but I do think we're a tool that will help, just make people stronger for the event. And then on the Force Train Tower side, I think what has been exciting us and is going to continue to excite us was just to see how we really, I think it was very important as a business to really find the initial value, which was in sports medicine. And now to see all of the different routes and avenues that we're going with it is so exciting. Like, you start with some early adopters in the sports med because we can do limb symmetry index analysis and an earlier return to functional force output, to fast forward a year and a half, and now it's on a football floor in a D1 weight room, and it's like, let's get people training on this. It's a better modality. There's tremendous benefits to training with this type of resistance. So, like I mentioned, what Dr. Fry did, a great guy, and that just took him a long time to be able to get the machine, do the research, where now we have our first study in regard to the tactical space and functional isokinetics. So I think that's what excites us, and just the people. Like, the people in the space are tremendous. There's a group that I met that it's just a kind of some odd connections, and they're like, hey, why don't we do a grip strength study for you guys? Like, one of them's in a university setting, one's running a lab for the Marine Corps, and then a couple people I know are in the Marines, doing human performance. They're like, we could all get together and do a study around the benefits of it with some handheld dynamometry and then your rope. And I'm like, dude, I love that. Like, we're all for that. Just seeing what are the effects of the things that we're doing.
I think, from a maybe kind of zooming out from a slightly bigger picture perspective, I think the fact that you're so easily able to kind of connect the dots between the sports med, rehab world, performance, and sports science, like research, data collection, the fact that you're able to kind of link those worlds together, like that has to be how we evolve as an industry, is by kind of better communication rather than just more and more siloing. So if we can kind of share data and stuff like that between those worlds, your return to play is going to get better. You're going to be potentially less likely to get injured. I know we have to be a little bit careful with saying that, but that's a very real possibility. And then you can close the loop on that by figuring out the whys with the sports science and analytics side of things. Yeah, super exciting.
I think what excites me more than anything, just as a, where we are today, was in the early days, I was your typical engineer that was like, I have a good idea. And I didn't. And, but we went out and met people like Matt and G who were like, this is cool, but not the way you're looking at it. And like, my business partner and I just hit this crossroads where it was like, we very quickly realized, like, we could die on our sword and it wasn't going to be pretty, or we could be like, it's time to listen. And I think, by listening to people like you guys, the network grew. It was like, we had people that were making introductions for us with the opening, like, hey, these guys are willing to listen, which, I think that was interesting to see that was what was important to people. And now that's what really excites us, is we've gotten to a point where, as we have, one, we've had people come to us and ask us to build them solutions. And two, we're at a point where if we have an idea, we can call a Matt and a G and a lot of other people and be like, what do you think about this? And then you just get a crash course in, what matters, why does it matter? And we just want to keep growing, evolving, innovating, and optimizing.
Great. I have 2 big questions. First question. So for the average listener who maybe yet does not have access to Poseidon Strength or isokinetics in general, like a HUMAC I know is financially irresponsible for me to to go get one of those. So what can I do at home? Because this is the thing about isokinetics that I think a lot of practitioners, and I'm including myself in this, like we are limited because so much of it is dependent on tech. So your device, one that I mentioned the first time we spoke, the HUMAC, like I can't do those things in my garage necessarily. So do you have any guidance for people listening that want to know more or from an experiential standpoint? How do they mimic some of the benefits of isokinetics if they don't have access to the tech?
Sure,
Big
great question. And yeah, I'll kind of give a two-part answer to that. One, we are always scouring the country in 2 demo vans, and we're at a cool spot where we've had vans in. I was coming through Iowa, and another one of our guys was coming through Alabama, and we got a call from somebody, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And we were like, "Oh my gosh, you saw us!" And we got to hang out. So we always love a surprise demo. So if anybody wants to experience it, let us know. We also have good partners across the country now, where if you want to experience what our products feel like, let us know, and we'll try to plug you into someone, locally to give it a shot. And then this is a great and challenging question. I think I come back to that really fascinating connection, G, between isometrics and isokinetics. And I find ourselves in our home gym, which we've got the simple rack, we've got the sandbags, and then we've got the 2 fancy isokinetic machines. So it makes no sense whatsoever. But we still found ourselves doing more and more isometrics just in the value of them. I had a really good athletic trainer out in Iowa one time tell me he loves doing 60-second isometric holds. And we were like, we got to try that. And then like any staircase was my enemy for a week. So, I mean, just doing things like, I think that would be my answer, is we just found the value in and doing more isometrics.
That I can say from our side of things, that's a huge mainstay in our programming, massively influenced by people like Keith Barr and those guys. Like, yeah, I feel like isometrics almost can't not be in your programming nowadays. And I know it's kind of in the zeitgeist a little bit. Yeah, I completely agree. Like the value in there is huge.
I think one of the reasons that I fell in love with it was just, I had a very forward-thinking member from the sports medicine community one time say, as somebody in sports medicine, my medicine is load. Like my medicine is weight. And they were like, so I need to know how to dose it. I need to know objective load and load tolerance. And that's why they're willing to talk to us, because they're intrigued by what we're doing. But then I went to one sport physical therapist event just to learn. And one of the things that they had up was, I think, usually they'll say if your concentric strength would be considered 100% of your strength, I think isometric is 105% and eccentric is like 150%. It's just like, well, if I want to be exposing myself to higher doses of that load to get stronger, eccentric overload is like the holy grail of the entire industry, I would say. But isometrics I can do for $0 in my own garage. So that's what led me to just doing more isometric training.
Yeah. And again, especially for our community where tendons are notoriously beaten up, I think it can be such a good medicine. And almost, I was thinking about this when you said this earlier, with the ability of the tower and the isokinetics to be able to apply more force earlier in the rehab pathway. The value of that is incredible. Like I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate the kind of motor learning. That's another kind of passion of mine. I appreciate that is really important. So learning how to squat and bench and all those kind of Olympic lift, learning how to do those things is fantastic. But being able to expose a tendon to non-jerk high loads early doors is like that would have saved me so much time working with patients back in the day if I'd have had access to something.
Yeah, we had somebody, when you look at, but how do you do that safely? Like we had somebody speak on our behalf one time at a conference. And again, like anybody that listened to this from the beginning, sometimes we really struggle to describe it. And then I watched somebody nail it in 10 seconds where they were like, you've got fuck around and you've got find out. Where isokinetics is like your fuck around. Like, let's see what that, what is a good tendon load dose today? What does that look like for you? And then find out is like, let's put 225 on this isotonically, and oh shit, like you weren't, So yeah, that was how we just saw it nailed very quickly and, very easily.
It's really cool.
So another question. So how would you compare your solutions? The infinity rope is pretty cut and dry for me, but your force train tower compared to some of the other competitors. So why? Because I'm sure that when people are looking into isokinetic resistance, some other competitors may come up. So how is yours different, maybe superior? Why should they consider yours over others?
The number one thing we hear is that we did the best job compared to any competitor in the space as far as being the clang and bang of the tech company. So in the early days, we put a max force rating on our tower of 1,500 pounds. And we were like, that's just comical. And we went to CSCCA, and we had a strength coach who was a competitive power lifter come out of the hole at 800 and built the 1337 to win cash. And I can tell you, some people might be like, that's not possible. That's real. That's a real number. Like, we use a 5,000 pound load cell that's ungodly accurate to calibrate our machines. And we had 5 guys in a lift. They were all like, when's this competition end? And they came back with bite guards and belts. And we were like, oh shit, like, we're going to break the machine. So that's something that we're very proud of. Like, we want to be durable, because no tech is good if it has downtime. So that was very important to us. And I think recently somebody also did a really good job of explaining where we land, because nobody should ever say, I don't have a competitor. But somebody said, if you kind of had a spectrum, and on the left, or on the one end of the spectrum, you had the Humac, and on the other end, you had a Peloton. They said a lot of the people that we might look at as a Poseidon competitor, they're probably closer to that Peloton side, and then we're closer to the Humac, but not in the, not all the way up against the Humac, but kind of just in this little island of our own, which we like being there. So it is a little bit more challenging just from the educational barrier, but we like not having any specific direct competitor.
I've got 2 hopefully relatively quick ones. First one is like, so if you're listening and you're in charge of procurement and you have some money to kind of look into something like this, what's kind of flashed about? Like, if they pick up the phone and call you tomorrow, what's the timeline in terms of getting something like that in their facility?
Sure. So with our Infinity Rope, we try to keep them in inventory, and we have some now. So that can be just go on website, purchase, ship same day. If it's out of inventory, we're typically at like a 1 to 2 month wait, somewhere in there. And then with the Force Train Tower, we quote a 90-day lead time, but we also try to procure a little bit ahead as a business, so that just to eliminate some wait time. We love the marketing, and we love making customers happy. So we want to get them out in the world as fast as possible. So it's usually a little over a month, but we quote 90 days just in the event that we're sold out at time.
Okay, cool. And then just lastly, and you can be as vague or as specific as you want to be, but what does the next kind of 5-10 years look like for you as an individual, kind of as a product developer and as someone in this space, but also as Poseidon? Like, have you got any plans for trajectory and things like that?
That's a great question. I love developing. Like, for me, there's almost like part artist in me, which probably doesn't make any sense as an engineer, but like getting to build something, and you're just in the shop by yourself, and you build an early prototype, and then you take it out and you show it to somebody like you, Matt, or Yuji, and they're like, this is different. Like, this is awesome. Like, to me, that's the ultimate win for me. So part of me just loves that. I mean, I don't even look at it as sales anymore. I look at it as just networking. And like, most of my friends that I now text and call while I'm driving, I've met on that premise. So I think for me, it just looks like just doing a lot more of that. So going into a development cycle, building something, and just getting back out on the road. And I think we're also very blessed as a business in that we have people that have asked us to build specific solutions to specific problems. So I think the next 5 to 10 years, our goal would be to at least have like another 5 products in the portfolio that all solve, unique things. We're able to develop pretty quickly, like usually from completely clean slate to taking it on the road to show it people, we're like 3 months. So we're pretty quick to at least get, early proof of concept. We're pretty quick with it. So I think 5 to 10 years, it just, looks like that, growing the team, growing the product portfolio, and just staying in front of good people, meeting more people.
Exciting times.
Mark, how can people the basic questions, how can people get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I think our boilerplate answer would be through the website, sales@poseidonstrength.com. That's our best channel. That gets spread out to everybody on the sales team here. And then whoever needs to own the contact just takes it from there, usually instantaneously as soon as it comes in. That's the, most guaranteed way.
What does summer look like in terms of live appearances and visits and conferences and things like that?
Yeah, great question. So we will be at TSAC down in Orlando.
Us too. Yeah, we'll be there.
Yep.
We'll definitely have to catch up for a brew.
Yep, we'll be at TSAC, and then we'll be at NWCA, the National Wrestling Coaches Association show. So we got that end of July in Baltimore, and then TSAC in the middle of August. So we actually missed TSAC last year, but we'll have a pretty good booth this year. We now travel with like a 15-foot tripod with a rope hanging from it, and we'll be giving a good bit of cash away for whoever can climb it the longest. So,
oh man, I'm gonna have
then we do a raffle, because we do a raffle just to try climbing it. You get your name in a raffle, and then whoever sets the record at TSAC will be giving away cash.
Pretty cool.
What's the minimum height requirement for the Infinity Rope? I got short ceilings here. That's what I'm asking.
The lowest we have is a trainer with the UFC, he's got it like 8 or 9 feet. So that's really
That's
seated,
awesome.
just pulling. So you're not
Yeah.
going to do a ton of climbing, like maybe some from an L-seated position. The ideal height is a little bit like closer to 12 foot. 130 inches to 150 is the sweet spot. And then we do custom ropes for as high as you want to go. So if you want to put it at 40 feet, you can. Kind of defeats the safety
Yeah, have
purpose.
people done that?
Well, we have one on an Army base that lives at like, I want to say it's 25 feet. It's pretty high.
It is
But you
high.
can still, that's an interesting point of our rope I didn't even bring up. You can still turn the velocity off and just use it like a regular climbing rope. So if you don't want to lose that modality, you can keep it. That's an
Interesting.
option we offer with it.
You can have people hold on and just eventually they have to lower, the gravity will take them down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun.
We do that for an educational, like learning to climb. If you have the speed on, somebody can just grab it and hold it. And once they get their footing, like the second time, you can just let go and then it starts to feed. So pretty good, like group training, learning to climb modality.
Right. Yeah.
We're scrambling to get all these types of videos out on the web because we're doing more and more with it every day. We just got to play catch up a little bit on all of our content.
We understand. What about, so you mentioned earlier literature. So are there certain studies that come to mind or certain practitioners like Dr. Fry that you mentioned that people should be, if they're interested, they want to look up some of the work out there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing I can offer there, we have a good library that's all condensed as a PDF that we can send of any case study we've done, any research. So again, if you reach out to us, we can just give you everything we have in a one-stop shop.
No, that's all of my questions asked. Thank you.
Mark, you got anything to add?
Just a big thank you. I really appreciate you guys. I mean, again, humbled to be included in things like this and love the space and just going to keep going.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I know Matt and I are looking forward to seeing you at TSAC. I guess I got to get brushed up on my rope training. I don't know where you're at with that.
My
You won't
fat
tell
ass is
Grant.
going nowhere.
Yeah. But Mark, thank you so much for your time. I had a lot of fun, really exciting. I really want to try to get your hands on the devices again. Let's say to really, send it, so to speak. And I think we're gonna end it here. So, listeners, we'll see you on the next one. Die living.